What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark. I'm MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. It's still spooky season, and this is Maxine. It's the third film in the X trilogy, and it is currently streaming on Max with audio description by William Michael Redman. And I previously already have reviews up for X and Pearl, and so you can search them on my channel if you want. If you're just so interested that you want to know more, then please do. I love more views and likes and subscribes and stuff like that. I think that's all really cool. So this stars Mia Goth, like the other three films have, and brings in probably the most star-studded cast Ty West has had so far, in terms of people that I was like, oh, look at that. That's fun. Notably Kevin Bacon, probably the biggest star, although this film does take place in the 80s, so I think that's kind of brilliant casting. I kind of wish he had done more of that, and used a lot of like 80s stars. I think that would have been kind of brilliant to bring people, especially people who aren't really acting anymore. I was thinking that, I was like, man, if he could really lean in here and bring in a whole bunch of people who we haven't really seen since the 80s, that would have been tight. But we've got like Michelle Monaghan, Bobby Cannavale, Elizabeth Debecki, Lily Collins, or James, one of them. I always get them mixed up. I think it's Collins though. One of the Lilies is in here. Halsey's in here. So Giancarlo Esposito. I'm gonna end up forgetting somebody, but basically it's a stack cast, far more than we've had in either X or Pearl. And it's got a completely different vibe. It's very much these sort of like overly erotic thrillers that we had sort of pervasively in the 80s, and even in the early 90s we were still having them, like Basic Instinct and stuff like that. We're still breaking into the 90s, so Sliver, stuff like that. So it's not like it was an exclusively 80s thing, but this is very themed in the 80s. In the background there's the Night Stalker is killing people, and maybe even coming after Maxine. Who knows? You know, when you've got that serial killer peak amp frightening intensity around every corner, who knows who's going after Maxine. But it's definitely a horror movie. I think some people were a little bit thrown off by the tonality of the film, how it was different than the previous films, but I think really Pearl was different than X, and so Maxine has to be different than both Pearl and X. So I don't really see it as being that big of a problem. I'm not like a massive fan of this franchise, but for some people this is like, I've seen a lot of people, it is an A24 film, and A24 is like a cult, and I've seen definitely a lot of people who are like, this is their favorite trilogy of all time. That's not just horror trilogy, just trilogy of all time. So I realize every time that I step into this trilogy, I'm stepping into almost like the same danger as stepping into like the Snyderverse. You know, like, am I gonna piss off the A24 fans? I don't know. So first of all, I love the choice of William Michael Redman as narrator. I think he's always a solid choice for anything that's creepy and horror. I'm really never going to criticize that ever. I'm going to criticize his use in certain genres that are outside of that. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to put him on a kids movie, but, you know, in this genre, he's absolutely perfect casting. The audio description was well written and recorded. Certain elements that I can't really discuss because they're very spoilery. Just having to deal with gore and like who gets killed, and I thought were really well done. I always like when horror movies lean into gore. I hate when they're like, meh. Seems like somebody's like wimping out on us, and they're like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to describe that for you. I don't know. I think my favorite piece of the audio description, although not my favorite piece of the movie, but my favorite piece of audio description has to do with the description of decapitated heads. There's one that kind of flops out of a suitcase, and its mouth is like frozen in the Scream, like the original Scream, and there's another one that's like propped up on a bed, giving you no context whatsoever on either one of those. I would say that the description of both of those was really pretty solid. There's sort of like a plot twist in the third act, which really kind of twists the film around. Again, this is another film where it's tough to tell you like who does what, and basically Maxine she's trying to make it in the industry, but she's done porn, and that is hampering her opportunity to do this. However, I was thinking about this, and they do bring up, I can't think of her what her name was, but there was an actress who was doing a lot of that like sort of like softcore Showtimey stuff back in the day, those Skinamax things that we used to always joke about. And there's a reference to how Maxine could at least do that, and she's like, no, I want to be better than that. You know, I want to be a real star. And you know, plus that person didn't do actual porn, and she just does very risque movies. I remember being a kid and always when one of those movies would come on late at night, and I'd be like, what is this, and why am I allowed to watch this? How is this on the same channel as everything else? It always felt very like tawdry, even like earlier on when I was still trying to figure out sexuality stuff. You know, they're not showing like, there aren't any like Showtimey Skinamaxy things that are with dudes. So it was basically all just like these weird, like, is there a plot type movies where basically it's like softcore porn with like a loose plot. And I'm like, oh, I was just watching a real movie, I swear to God, right before this. And now this is on, and I don't understand how these two things are on the same channel. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble. I feel like if my parents catch me. And that's sort of what I feel like Maxine is like headed, and where she's headed. And, but then stuff happens in the movie, and it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, well, if you become tangentially attached to something, how does that change your fame? I think it explores a lot of things. Ty definitely has something to say here. And I think people have really undercut that, because Maxine has not been necessarily the most well-received movie of the year. I kind of thought Pearl was a little bit oversold. I thought Pearl was okay. And I think one of the things is Mia Goth has been strong across all three films. And some people just get caught up in the performance, which is fine. But I think Maxine doesn't have any more or less to say than the previous two films. I think Ty definitely has a specific period in time that he wants to talk about, and things he wants to talk about, and representation of women. There's definitely sort of like a theme of Hollywood and sin, and you know, the devil within you, and that kind of stuff is all sort of like prevalent through there, which was something that they always sort of talk about with movies in terms of you're going to hell for this, or don't watch that because that's the devil's work right there. You know, I mean, like, that kind of stuff it's also sort of prevalent. There are a lot of like protests and stuff, and but I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I didn't hate it. It's not my favorite film of the year, but I don't think X or Pearl were my favorite films of the year either. I think this trilogy is fine. I don't want to like burn it down, burn down the house with it. And it's gory. So if you're a horror fan and you're thinking, oh, did they tone down the gore? I mean, like, compared to what? You know what I'm saying? Like, Um, it's less gorier than like The Substance from what I hear. So everything I've heard about The Substance, I haven't seen it yet, but um, I've read pretty detailed descriptions of that, and I can tell you based on that that this is less gorier than that. Uh, but it is among the gorier films I've seen this year. So, sure, you know, is it the goriest of the franchise? I don't know. Probably not. Um, but it doesn't lack it. It has a decent runtime. It moves along well. Again, I think if I had any changes, if Ty had consulted me, which he didn't, I would have maybe said, it would be really cool would be some of these actors or, these actors that you're referencing in this period is to include more of them. Like, I think the Kevin Bacon casting is brilliant because of the 80s, but I would have gone in more on these people, like, I don't know, like Jeff Fahey, like somebody who just kind of screams 80s, who just never really made it out of the 80s, to the point where even something like Jean-Claude Van Damme would have been sort of almost like brilliant casting in some ways, because of this period. But also, like, Sharon Stone would have been an excellent grab for this. There's a character played by Elizabeth Debecki, who could have been great as Sharon Stone. Like, or just there were a lot of people who made ish films like this before, and the more mainstream ones, and then also like less mainstream ones. And I think had he tapped into that and really gone nostalgic with it and brought back all these faces, like Halsey doesn't really bring anything to the table here, but I'm sure there's somebody from the 80s who would have made interesting casting choices. So I think that would have been fun. I think it would have been cool to see a lot of those faces pop up from back in that time period that we haven't seen in a while. And I'm sure that they wouldn't have minded the work. So, and maybe while he's trying to say all of what he's trying to say with the right people, it really, really resonated seeing Maxine alongside all of these people from the 80s. So Mickey Rourke, for example, would be great. I mean, there are people who, it's not even like you have to like drag the dregs and get people who are like, I don't know, like, has anybody heard from this person in 20 years? I don't know. No. Did they have an agent? No. I think they work at Big Lots, I don't think you have to do that, but there are plenty of people who come out of that time period who would have felt right for this. And instead he cast a bunch of people who weren't really acting in the 80s. So, although I think Giancarlo Esposito was in Do the Right Thing, so I think he technically overlaps. His career is a lot longer than people give it any credit for, because most people just saw Breaking Bad and were like, oh, this new guy that's in Breaking Bad, he's really good. So, and it's like, IMDb him. You'll find out. So, yeah, anyway, it's okay. It's, I'm not upset with it. I think there's something here. I think Mia Goth is good, but I think she's probably had opportunities to be better. Here, she's more self-assured, which is one of the things that in the other films she got to play, sort of that she feels way more like a like her survival instincts are kicking in X. Here, she feels way more like Sidney Prescott in like Scream 2. Like, I've been here before. And I will make it out again. It doesn't really feel like she ever thinks she's in any real danger. She doesn't have the same vibe as she does in X, where she feels like, oh shit, oh my god, am I gonna be the one that lives? I don't know. Jenna Ortega's career is looking pretty great. Maybe she'll be the one, and then in Pearl, where her character is just completely different, and has a completely different like time period and everything to live in. So this doesn't really push her that much. It's like you won't hear awards buzz. Everybody like wanted her to be nominated for Pearl, and this doesn't really give her the same range. So, but I don't think that makes it bad. I think uh, I think is probably going to close the trilogy, but I also think there's a possibility that if Ty really wants to do something later on, that he could probably make a commentary on Mia, and what happens to Maxine when she, sort of like what the substance is doing with Demi Moore, what happens when you turn a certain age and you stop getting offered the sexy roles and you start getting offered the mother roles or the grandmother roles or no roles at all. Anyway, watch it if you want, or don't watch it. I think it'd be weird for you to watch it if you haven't seen the others, but I would say definitely at least X, because Pearl is a prequel, so to X, so you really need to see X, I would say, at least, in order to understand Maxine. I wouldn't tell people to see Scream 2 without seeing Scream. So it's kind of like that. Anyway, I'm gonna give Maxine a B-. It was okay. It was fine. I think it's been beleaguered a little bit, but I don't feel like beleaguering it. I think it had an interesting third act twist, and kudos to Ty on getting a solid cast to show up for him. So, but I would have picked different people, and really leaned in on the 80s thing. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.